for joining us on this episode of the Path to Tech podcast. I'm your host Vishal, and we have an exciting episode lined up for you today. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Dale De Silva. Dale is a product designer and a developer who operates at the intersection of motion, art, and code. Dale is the creator of several notable projects, including the Obsidian plugins like Ink and Project Browser. I'm personally a user and I love the Ink plugin. Thank you, Dale. And Dale also shares his insights on design and development through his platform Design Dead Club. Dale also has other creative pursuits, which extend to his philosophical blog called Falter in Resolute. Having worked with Dale at Sensan, I personally witnessed his passion for technology and his ability to bridge the gap between product and development. Today, we'll dive deep into Dale's journey, his projects, his unique perspective on the tech industry. So let's kick things off with some engaging questions. Welcome to the show, Dale.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Let's start at the very beginning. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, your childhood, and how you first became interested in the intersection of design, development, and animation that has shaped your career?
Yeah, awesome. No worries. I guess jumping all the way back to high school, my dad, I think we got an NEC computer way back in the day, and I always, on that computer I started programming in BASIC, just like on the terminal or MS-DOS prompt.
Right.
And I'd make like little squares, like move across the screen and stuff. In high school, I always knew I wanted to be an animator, so I wanted to go work for like Pixar or something like that. And I did a lot of creative arts kind of in school, but also a lot of IT, and we got graphics calculators in high school, so I made a few little games on that. I made a snake game, and I went through, so this is kind of the first convergence of design and development for me. I took a photo of myself, made it black and white, and put it into, I think, Paint, and made it low res, and went through all the pixels and to decide which pixels were on and off, and then I programmed that into the graphics calculator and made that a snake level. Kind of just because I was like making snake, and I was like, how can I make sure all my friends know that I made this?
Right, so the whole board was actually your face. It's really cool.
And then I went to university, and I went and did multimedia design. I was tossing up between computer science and design, and I did multimedia design, and so we learned about websites, and we learned about video editing, and lots of different things. I think Macromedia Director was a thing back then, Macromedia Flash. And then after that, I started teaching straight away, mostly Flash web development.
Right.
And I started doing freelance websites in Flash web development. And then over time, that teaching, as Flash died out, that teaching turned into more motion graphics teaching. So teaching After Effects, Adobe After Effects. And I'd always try and get like some scripting in there, teach people how to think about how to build an expression in After Effects so that things could move in a more automated way. And then, because straight after uni I went and worked for myself straight away, I feel like that probably wasn't the best decision, because I was kind of I didn't know how to run a business, and I was freelancing, and I didn't know when I should think about, like, should I scale this to a bigger thing? It didn't even enter my mind. So, and I didn't even know what proper price ranges were or anything like that. So I think I kind of took on too much work, and I probably didn't charge enough, and that's why I ended up getting so much work and kind of burnt out a little bit. And then I had this period where I was like, what do I do next? If I go and work in a studio as a designer, I'll probably still be doing late hours, which I was doing, but probably not actually earn as much, so it's not going to solve the problem. So I thought, maybe I pursue one of those other passions that has kind of bubbled up at the same time as everything else, which was computer science. But because I was fairly burnt out, I wasn't sure actually what would solve it and what I wanted to do. So I ended up deciding I was really interested in AI, and that made me feel like I was interested in robotics. And so I started a double degree in robotics and computer science.
Right.
And I wanted to go back and study an undergrad. I didn't want to do a master's because I felt like I'd taught some master's subjects at uni, and it felt like a lot of people come from different disciplines and don't necessarily have the expertise to build on. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get the core foundational kind of learning. I did about half of that course and then realised I didn't really want to build dishwashers, and probably not, most people probably don't build robots. And really my interest in robotics was more philosophical, even AI was more philosophical. So I decided to cut off the robotics and just finish the computer science degree. So after that, I still struggled in terms of where I worked, because then I had these two degrees, design and development, and I still had a passion for both. And if I went and got a job in development, I would be getting a graduate wage. If I went and got a job in design, I would be getting a much better wage, but I'd also just spent 6 years studying development.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a hard decision. I ended up landing a job that was a great combination of both. I don't know. I think that catches us up.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Ask me any questions on it?
Well, if it's any consolation, I think every person in their life goes through a phase where they're really into robotics. So, so it's good that you figured out that you were more interested in the philosophical side of things. I had my robotics phase as well, if it's any consolation. Thank you for that, Dale. I really want to jump into one of your projects that I'm a big fan of. You have a project which is an Obsidian plugin, Obsidian being a very popular open source note-taking app. You have a plugin called Ink, which is one of your plugins, and that plugin allows people to draw, handwrite on Obsidian. So what inspired you to create a tool like that for Obsidian?
I've always been interested in plugin development and enhancing tools. I guess my primary interest when I've been programming has always been enhancing my tools. Back in the day, I used to create plugins for MediaMonkey, which was kind of like Winamp. And so Obsidian came along, and I was using OneNote for ages. I was really into handwriting at university the second time, taking notes by hand. But I was getting a bit frustrated with OneNote, and so I saw Obsidian, and because it uses Markdown and keeps all your files as plain text, you can always move it somewhere else really easily if you want to. But so I installed it, and I liked it, but I couldn't quite move off OneNote because there was no way to handwrite in it. So I thought, let's try and build a plugin to do that. And along the way, I thought, I can actually make this better than my experience in OneNote. And it's not quite there yet, but I think there's certain parts of it that work really well. And one is, in OneNote, it's kind of like halfway between an infinite canvas and a vertical scrolling page. And it's not really clear which one you should use.
Right.
And I realized the Obsidian plugin, because it works in a vertical scrolling page, we can insert these blocks right in that page of handwriting and potentially drawing that can expand infinitely but still sit within a vertical page. So it really helps, I think, at least my process of doing things like UI design, where I'll do a design and then I want to do another iteration of that design. And so I can duplicate that directly under it. And when you go back and read that, you read it vertically. You're not on an infinite canvas where you're wondering which direction to go. So it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And so that's how it started. And now I have this vision of it being kind of this focused handwriting tool that offers some additional things that maybe handwriting hasn't gone to yet in other apps.
Yeah, yeah, incredible. And now it already has about 35,000 downloads. People are loving it, and you built a following in YouTube and in the digital world, right? So that's amazing. So the next thing I wanted to go into was building in public. So there are a lot of creators who have these ideas about their projects, and they love to build it in the public, just share their milestones, get their communities involved. So you mentioned that you're recording development diaries for Inc. Before we started the conversation, and I've been following those videos as well. So you also, so I guess, like, how has this process of documenting your progress in public influenced your development approach?
One aspect of it is definitely motivation. I've got a few videos on my YouTube that are standard videos that are more about design, and especially because I had a teaching background, I was very much about like curating these videos in a specific way, and I get a lot of compliments on those videos, but they took too much time.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, well, how can I do this, documenting my progress in public and just build up that consistency of posting things. And I realized that YouTube has a live tab, because what I wanted to do was I wanted to put these videos on my YouTube, but I didn't want to take away from the more curated videos with these rough as guts videos. And I realized that it separates the live streams onto a different tab. So I thought, oh, I can live stream and not dilute the other videos.
Right.
And so that was a key realization for me, because then creating these regular videos, like maybe 2 a week, at best, that's the best case scenario, creating those live streams becomes less work, because I turn a camera on, I speak live. No one necessarily watches live, but at least my work starts at making the video, starts at turning the camera on and ends at turning the camera off.
Right.
And I don't have to worry about editing.
There's no post. Yeah.
There is a little bit now, because sometimes I have technical issues, and I've realized in YouTube you can cut some things out even afterwards.
Right.
So if the video gets too long for a silly reason, you can shorten it, and that will help the algorithm and help your people watch all the way through as well.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
It did. I'm also interested in what has that given back to you? Like, obviously maintaining a YouTube channel, posting twice a week on the best weeks, that takes a lot of effort, even if you're not doing a lot of posts. But what have you gotten out of that experience?
What I've gotten out, and where the effort actually becomes more, is not in the video. It's in the way it motivates me to get more work done on those projects. So because I know I want to keep putting out regular episodes, I'm always thinking about, oh, this feature I'm working on, if I can just get it to this stage, I can talk about it in a video.
Right.
And so not a night goes by, there's no nights that go by without me jumping on the computer for at least half an hour to try and progress my project a little bit. And also in terms of other benefits, my YouTube, when I started doing those live streams, which was maybe about 8 months ago, I'm not quite sure, was about 200 followers, and now it's about 1,300. So
to the moon, baby.
yeah. So it's getting there. It's still low numbers, but it's definitely, you can see it speeding up, and you can see things getting there.
Yeah, definitely. So what I heard was a lot of it is basically helping yourself create these milestones in your head and keeping yourself more responsible.
Right. Absolutely.
Cool. Wonderful. Now, there's this aspect of your personality that I'm really intrigued by, right? You have so many projects, you have so many things going on, for our listeners, so some of the things that I can think of off the top of my head that Dale does is he recently did some work in XR for a university. You write about AI, prompt engineering, and things like that in your philosophical blog, Falter and Resolute. You have your own plugins for these tools. Not only for Obsidian, you also build plugins for other tools as well. And and then there's the work that you do. So how do you handle a breadth of all of these things that you apply yourselves in, and how do you make sure that you're balancing everything out?
It's a timely question because I mean obviously we just talked about it. I've burnt out before.
Right. Yeah.
I regularly kind of do my day job
Mm-hmm.
and then have certain time cooking dinner and spending time with my partner and then making time at night to work on my projects. Because I've had the last 2 weeks off over Christmas, I decided I wanted to work on my ink plugin full time,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been doing a bit too much.
Mm-hmm.
And the last couple of days have kind of been like, oh, this is the first time I feel worn out from just doing my own stuff.
Right.
So it is a kind of a balancing act, and I am one of these people who, kind of as you implied, has lots of different interests, and trying to fit them all in is really difficult. I used to be trying to learn guitar, and I at some point decided this is something I have to stop because I don't make enough progress and I can't fit everything in.
Yeah.
In terms of the projects, I use ClickUp for task management,
Right.
and I've gone through a bunch of different task managers, and I've kind of landed on ClickUp as my favorite. And I've set up different boards of tasks lists where I can record stuff really easily. So when I have a new concept of something that I'd love to build in the future, I dump it on this product backlog board.
Right. Yeah.
And eventually the idea is that once I get rid of one project and launch that, or just do enough with it that I'm happy to move on from it, then I can pull from that product backlog and I can prioritize that. So kind of like how people run a workplace anyway.
Yeah.
And then and then recently, I've also been thinking about how that digital ClickUp catalog of things doesn't necessarily make my priorities as visible as I want them to be. So the ones that I'm working on have their own lists of like, this is not necessarily a sprint, but this is like version 0.3 and these are the features I want to get out, and then I've got a few things like that. But I have to really go through those lists to figure out, what are my main themes at the moment. So I actually made a couple of physical magnet boards, and I've been writing on little cards. These are my short-term goals, these are my mid-term goals, these are my long-term goals. And I'm only putting like a few different products on there to say, these are my main themes. Don't forget that these are my themes, even though I'm stuck in the weeds most of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. I think you've brought up something really interesting that our audience and also people who come, the Skillaroo community, would really appreciate. This is the fact that a lot of our students, they want to do a lot of things, right? So they want to work on the back end, developing the front end. They want to do AI. They want to make money so that they're paying their bills. They want to have a normal social life. And I find them juggling a lot of different things as well, and sometimes without understanding what their own priorities are, because they want to do a lot of these things, but maybe they haven't put the effort to organize, prioritize, and then set up a, let's say, a roadmap for it, right? So my question to you is, as someone who works across a lot of different things and as somebody who builds productivity tools, what's your personal approach to staying organized and managing various projects? I know you said ClickUp. I know you said that there are some limitations and it sometimes doesn't actually reflect the priority of things that you're actively working on. So can you share some tips with us about how do how do you manage that, and how do you get the productivity up, I guess?
How detailed do you want me to go? Do you want me to stay at a conceptual level, or like this is how I organize my ClickUp boards?
Well, let's start on a high level,
Yep.
and then we can go into the bits of it, because I think this is a juicy part of the conversation with a lot of meat on the bone.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's start at a pretty high level, and then we can probe deeper.
The first thing that comes to mind is some of my projects are writing projects. And so that was a very difficult one to make time for. I used to go to a writing group at night. Now I sometimes go to a cafe with a friend in the morning before I start work and do a little bit of kind of like hand-taking notes and reading there. But that wasn't really enough to work on some of my longer blog posts that I wanted to do, and I wasn't making enough time for it. So I've actually kind of set aside Sundays as my writing only day. And I go to a cafe and a library, and so I spend about 5 hours writing on Sundays.
Right.
And that's working really well, but that's very much an exercise in sacrifice.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable sacrificing that time, but the difficulty is my relationships. So my partner has gotten to know me and knows that my projects are really important to me, so she's fine with that, but regularly kind of our families will schedule things on Sundays, and it's very much deciding, well, what's important to me. I need to make a decision to tell my family this is a day or this is a time period where I don't do things with anyone.
Yeah.
It's for me, and I need to keep progressing. In terms of the projects, because I'm very conceptual and I'm constantly having new ideas and I don't want to lose them, and there are always future projects that I want to work on. One of the big things for me was setting up a whole bunch of iOS shortcuts on my phone. So I have a series of ClickUp lists for kind of game ideas or product ideas or a specific product inspiration things. And then I have some Obsidian vaults, note-taking vaults that are specifically for collecting inspiration or references for certain projects. And I was finding that it was painstaking to use those because I'd have to open ClickUp, find that list, and then by that time I've kind of lost the idea, and then I was spending too much time trying to remember the idea again, and I was losing a lot of time that I shouldn't have been working at all, just trying to get down some of the ideas so that I could do them later. So setting up those shortcuts enables me to click one icon on my phone and it automatically goes straight to that list, and I can just type something in and then move on with my day.
Right.
And that reduces a lot of mental load so that I can stay focused on the thing that I'm actually doing, be it like socializing or be it working on a specific project. And then I can write down that other idea and then forget about it and know that it's saved so that I can focus on the priorities. In terms of, sorry, did I skew off your question?
No, I think that's good. So what you touched on was first, I guess, creating your own personal time and then letting your relationship people in your circle knowing that this time is for my projects. And second thing you mentioned was setting up your tools in such a way that you're more effectively able to capture ideas. I really relate to the second thing as well. Like one example that came to my mind when you were talking about that is, especially when I'm using AI, when I'm using large language models to get something done, I really find that just the amount of effort I have to put into prompt things in order to get a reasonable response is a lot. And sometimes it's basically disincentivizing me to actually ask that question to LLM. So what I did was I figured out I speak much faster than I type. So I have a local voice-to-text, speech-to-text LLM running on my computer. So I talk to it, and it basically converts to the text. I use that, which is much faster, and I find that to be a really good workflow. So I realized that there are workflows which might be relevant to individuals as well, but I really like setting up your tools in such a way that you're more able to get things done without friction.
Just to touch on your original question as well, you were talking about how do you create the right kind of roadmap and stick to it and make sure, because that's been a theme in my career as well, because I have such wide interests. I've spread myself too thin too often. And then I find myself later in my career thinking, or I have found myself later in my career thinking, I'm not specialized enough. I don't know deep enough knowledge about any particular thing. And so I feel like I have felt like my career hasn't progressed enough. And then luckily I've had lots of opportunities since then to go, actually my special skill set, my superpower is actually at that intersection. And I've built a good skill set at that intersection, but it's still an important thing to know how to do, how to stick with one thing for long enough that you actually develop deep knowledge with it. I don't know the answer for it, but I think writing down some of these priorities and writing down some of these goals of things you want to do so that your subconscious brain knows that you're not abandoning it, you're just tucking it away somewhere that you will find later so that you can focus on this other thing. And knowing what are the things you want to achieve on this other thing before you're ready to then switch gears and look into something else. So that you can develop kind of deeper knowledge before you move on.
Yeah, I think that's a good technique to remove that cognitive load from your head that, I've got these 15 things that I'm supposed to be working on and I'm not progressing on any one of them. So rather than that, park the 14, work on the one, build expertise, become a T-shaped person and then become a bi-shaped person and then become an M-shaped person, right? I saw this on LinkedIn the other day, but that's really good advice.
It's probably it's probably a smiley face in the end, right?
Wonderful. Thank you for those productivity tips. The next thing I wanted to come on was design and development, and I think you're a really good person to ask this question because your superpowers are in the intersection of those two areas, also animation and also a bunch of other things as well. So how do you see the relationship between these two disciplines evolving in the tech industry, especially with generative AI in the picture?
Interesting. I think that the impact on development is much clearer than the impact on design at the moment because coders have been using LLMs for a while now. As you said before, it still gets so much stuff wrong that it's sometimes hard to understand when you should use it and when you should just keep going. In terms of design, you've got examples of like Figma introducing AI UI development and then quickly pulling it out because it was copying Apple's designs. I believe so,
Right, I missed this.
They might have put it back now, but I think there's difficulty there. Whereas I guess copying code structures is more accepted compared to copying visual designs. I have often thought that, how much should I focus on my coding skills because AI is probably going to end up being able to do that a bit better than my concepting skills. And should I guess I haven't thought that I should just focus solely on that, but I've thought, maybe we're getting to a point where my skill set is actually going to be the most valuable because I can understand what a coding AI will give to me and I can think about the user experience that should be developed and make decisions around that and come up with those concepts and steer it a bit better. Because an AI, yeah, eventually it'll get really good. I mean, it is pretty good at making UI stuff now, but it's not going to be very good at understanding what users want and what will help, you know, the physical constraints of a human interact with something until it's really, really kind of AGI level stuff. So I think for me, that's kind of my long-term focus of keep heading towards that, proving my value as that intersection person and that ideas person who knows enough general things that they can tie everything together really well. So it's probably, I guess to summarize, I guess where it's going is AI is going to make the generalist the most important person, I think.
Nice. I think that's really nicely put, and I agree with that as well. So when you were saying about how large language models are better able to give you code than they are able to generate design that works for you, I think that I have seen that as well. And as a result of that, my thoughts are a lot of back-end specialized developers will now need to onboard more design skills as well. They need to do a bit more about for the product, apart from just building APIs and doing databases and backups and infrastructure.
Design meaning front-end design or design meaning system design?
I think product design as a whole, at least being involved in that conversation. You don't have to be an expert, like you don't have to be an expert in UI UX, but you need to be able to like be in the room and collaborate, give your ideas, give your inputs. You can't just build APIs and say I'm a backend developer. I think generalist is what the world is heading towards, and what we were saying earlier about T-shaped, pie-shaped, and a smiley face-shaped individuals. I think that's going to those people are going to be really, really valuable assets as well. One story comes to my mind. So this is right. So let's say you want to be among the top 100 in a particular field. Let's say you want to be a world's top 100 product designers, right? There's only 100 people that can be that, right? out of 9 billion people, which means it's really competitive, right? But if you want to be, let's say, top 1% product designers, top 1% developer, and top 1% animator, then that's a much easier pool to get into, right? Because you have to build specializations across 3 different separate disciplines, and then chances are someone like you who has done exactly those 3 disciplines to the level that you've done.
There's less of a pool.
Less of a pool, right? Yeah. So it's easier to stand out when you have a breadth of experiences than just one skill set.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, it's still you still got to build up those skills in each thing. So it's easy to stand out, but it's also harder to build the broad skills.
You start as a T person, right? you first you have a breadth without depth. You start building depth in one area and then go from there. Cool. While we're on this topic of tech and projecting how tech industry might evolve in the future, what emerging technologies or trends do you think will have the biggest impact on the way we humans interact with each other and create digital content?
It's going to be hard for me not to say AI, but to dig further from my gut reaction of AI is, for me, customization. I think one of my big frustrations with just design and products in general the last probably 10 years is how they've, especially once we moved to mobile-focused AI, mobile-focused development, we started to see user experience as a simplification process, and not simplifying the mental load directly, but rather simplifying the capability of what we allowed users to do. And products seem to try and imply that, you know, you don't need to do all these things because we'll take care of this stuff for you. You don't need to be able to manage your music playlists in a comprehensive way because we'll just cue music for you based on what we think you like. And along the way, and most of the time, if you happen to be the person that works for, great, but most people it doesn't quite work for, and then they don't have the actual tools to manage things because the product development has been focused on automating your needs rather than giving you the control of things.
Right.
Now that we hit AI, some of those promises can become more true. They can more intimately understand you and be more responsive to your needs. But I still think there's a lot of growth that we can do in mobile and web development where we just say, well, actually UX isn't about simplifying the capability, it's just about simplifying the mental load, and we can still put in a lot more customization and functionality in there. We just have to design it in a way that feels simple to people. And I think AI can also help with that, revealing things or hiding things as necessary, and just allowing you a deeper, more customizable way of using software. So customizability is probably my big answer.
Right. Yeah. I have heard somebody call it as hyper-personalization, right? So with AI and these incredible tools, we're able to curate contents and even platforms for specific people, their interests, and whatever context the AI has about those people. Right?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. I know that you have done some work at Swinburne on storyboarding in XR. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was and what your role was there?
Yeah, so because I taught at Swinburne for so long, one of my close mates who used to be a supervisor when I taught there, he's heading up the media studies course now, or department rather, and he wanted to revamp some of their content and help some of the students think about designing immersive media and how to storyboard that, how to think about the concepts and plan for it, because they're not specifically a design faculty where they learn how to build it, but rather they learn the production behind things and how to produce something. I think I'm getting this right, and they learn how to kind of think about the concepts and plan for something. So they're not necessarily great drawers. They don't necessarily have the tech skills. So how can we create some tooling to help them do that? So we looked at so he hired me as a freelancer to build some of these templates. So we looked at, well, what are the common ways people think about things in this field? And the obvious thing to address is, if you do a storyboard for a standard movie, a traditional flat screen movie, you have a limited space, that rectangle, to work in. So you can create a series of rectangles on a page and you can draw what you want it to look like. But in an immersive experience, what the person sees, what they're looking at, is kind of like a rectangle, but they also might not be looking that direction. They could be looking in 360 degrees. They could be looking the other direction. So how do you represent that on a piece of paper? There's a number of different ways of doing it, but there are some different things that people have tried, and we ended up honing on kind of a semi-top-down view and a number of lo-fi visual artifacts that people could use. and thinking about what was required in terms of drawing skill and how we can minimize that and create the biggest impact in terms of planning and understanding what you're building without having to take the time to illustrate things really perfectly or jump straight on the computer straight away.
Right. That's incredible. Like, as someone who has very little exposure to creative arts, but but really sounds exciting. Interesting, especially with XR. And I can imagine if you're in an immersive experience watching a movie, but you're facing the other way, then that's a problem, right? Wonderful. So the next thing I want to go into is for our listeners and for aspiring tech creators and developers and designers. What advice would you give to them if they are in a phase of their career where they are looking to start building their career?
I think one of the regrets I've had that I think turns out as a piece of advice in this context is that try and finish some projects. Get projects to a point where you can release it into the world. I've done a lot of, like as I mentioned before, I've worked on a lot of plugins. So I did a browser plugin for Trello. I did a bunch of plugins for a music player, and I got them to a point where they work for me, and then I kind of lost steam a little bit, and I really wish I'd pushed them just a little bit further, or just released them earlier, because then I would have a huge catalogue of projects that I put out in the world that would have changed where my career is today. And instead I've realised that I've made that mistake a bit late, and so now I'm fixing that. And I've since I first realised this, I've now released a bunch of stuff, and I'm really happy with how it's going. But I really wish I'd done that earlier and released more things earlier. Another thing was I went back and studied again a second degree. In hindsight, I know why that happened, because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I started that robotics thing, and then it ended up being computer science. If I had the awareness that it was just going to be computer science, I actually wouldn't have gone back to university. I would have learnt online or learnt from small places like Skillaroo instead, because I was already coding in Flash. I could have gone and gotten a front-end developer role. I think there was a bit of imposter syndrome there. There was a bit of me trying to be a perfectionist and understand things perfectly. But realistically, instead of going to uni again for 6 years and paying thousands of dollars, I could have started as the most junior developer and gotten paid for 6 years, and then come out of that 6 years with 6 years of industry experience. And that would have completely changed where my career is now. So just I guess losing that imposter syndrome and recognizing what you've got, and that most of your skills you'll learn on the job, I think is really valuable as well.
That's wonderful. I love both of the pieces of feedback. I think the first one I resonate with as well. Stop starting, start finishing, right? Like, don't just begin projects and then keep them in abandoned state. Finish it, put it out there, see what people have to say. Who knows, like somebody might even ask you to come and meet them as a result of that. Thank you, Dale. This has been really interesting. I have another round planned for us, which is rapid fires. So the idea of this round is for us to go through a bunch of questions and for you to answer them in as little words as possible. You ready?
Yep.
All right. So let's start with an easy one. What's your favorite coding language for a quick prototype?
It's still TypeScript in React, and just using AI, like Cursor AI, to like do most of the work.
I should adapt this question. What's your favorite coding language and AI tool for building a prototype? All right. Next one. What's that one app you cannot live without?
It's either ClickUp or Obsidian, some sort of note-taking app. Yeah.
Okay, so your head is in productivity. Okay, what are the things that I need to do? So my next question for you is, what is the most inspiring TED Talk that you have ever watched?
I watched one. It was a TEDx talk, so it wasn't a full TED talk, but it was about productivity.
Right.
And I can't remember what he said. I just remember it was very inspiring. But it was about getting out of your own way and just kind of forgetting about the things you're worried about and just keep moving forward.
Do you remember who the speaker was?
No.
Cool. If we find the link, then I'll include it in the podcast. All right, so the next one is physical notebooks or digital notes?
Digital all the way.
Okay, hence you want a handwriting plugin for your digital note-taking app. What is the most unexpected source of inspiration for your work?
Probably just podcasts in general. It's hard to say they're unexpected because I do just listen to a lot of tech podcasts. But they're always kind of broadening what I'm thinking about. So it really helps.
Wonderful. And finally, one last one. If you could instantly master one new skill, what would it be?
Playing guitar.
Playing guitar?
Yeah.
Wonderful. I don't know if I would agree, but that's a good answer. We've arrived at the end of the episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we end, I'm going to give you my answer for what I think is the biggest, my biggest tech prediction for the next 5 years. So I was talking to guys, and this is about robotics, funnily. I think kitchens are going to be obsolete in 5 years.
Kitchens?
Kitchens, yeah. Because if you have two robotic arms making you the healthiest, tastiest, freshest meal by ordering the latest from Amazon and being delivered the same day, why would you want a kitchen? Like, for example, people used to have a dedicated space in their house for doing laundry. They don't have it anymore. They just have washing machines and dryers, right? Yeah. And I think the same is going to happen to kitchens as well. Kitchen will be optional in a house. If you want a kitchen, you can have a kitchen, but you don't need a kitchen. You have two robotic arms that'll do the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree and I disagree.
Okay.
I think there's definite avenues where that'll happen. I think, especially with there's been companies kind of looking into more communal living situations, right? So I think in those situations where you're dealing with high density, and if you can get rid of a kitchen and make a communal kitchen that prepares, you just book a time slot for it to cook you dinner and the robot does it, absolutely. But I think unlike laundry, cooking is something that people do for fun as well, right? Yeah. So, and I think when AI takes over and does most of our work, the things that we do for passion are going to become the most sought after things. So that could see a surge in kitchen use as well. So I'm not sure where I sit on that.
Yeah, no, I see your point as well. It's kind of like biking, you don't have to bike everywhere, but if you want to, going biking is a pleasant way to spend a day. Yeah. So wonderful.
It's a good one. It's a fun one.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dale. We've unfortunately arrived at the end. I would love for this conversation to go on. We will go on after we turn the cameras off. But again, thank you. I hope the listeners enjoyed our conversation today. If you have any questions, comments about the episode or about our conversation, feel free to get in touch with us. Other than that, I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Dale.